Moving into the SEC, the Alabama Crimson Tide were on the field this past Saturday. I was very fortunate to be on the call and to get a good look at just how different this team might be from where they were last year. Of course, Nick Saban no longer patrolling the sidelines, but he was there on the sideline there before the game. Molly McGrath got to visit with him, and he went up to the booth and watched the game from up there with a roster in hand. So it's got to be uncomfortable for him to not have direct involvement there on the spring game. But either way, it's hard to take a lot away from this performance. I watched it over again, and I kind of feel the same way I felt when I was up there in the booth calling it alongside Dave Pasch. I thought, let's start with Jalen Milroe. I thought he made two really nice throws, both to Jeremy Bernard. One was on the seam route to the left-hand side. That was on the first drive. One was a little bit later over a defender on an over route where he threw it into a perfect location. I thought those were two really good throws. Now, the numbers aren't going to jump off the page, but those were two throws that he might not have made last year. Big-time throws, and there were some drops. There were some missed assignments offensively. So it's hard to look at the numbers and have a huge takeaway with how he impacted the game through the air. Plus, some of the things that he does great. Take off and run, moving in the pocket, extending plays, making guys miss. You can't do that when you're in a non-contact jersey. He did have one run early, but that was for the most part it. One revelation at the quarterback spot, though, was Ty Simpson's development. A lot of people thought he would enter the portal after the season last year. He ended up sticking around, and he is really looking comfortable in this new offense led by offensive coordinator Nick Sheridan. Really accurate, really decisive, got the ball out quickly, missed 2 or 3 throws, but for the most part, I thought he played faster this year than at any point last year, both in spring, summer, and then ultimately throughout the fall. The running back position remains a position of strength. Jam Miller was named the MVP. He had 83 yards and a couple touchdowns, and overall, the top 3 running backs, Jam Miller, Justice Haynes, and Richard Young, they all combined for 122 yards and 4 touchdowns. You also saw true freshman Daniel Hill get in there as well. But either way, they're really in a good spot at running back. The question I had was at wide receiver. And I think Jeremy Bernard, him transferring from Washington to Alabama, we knew he was an exceptional playmaker. We knew he was a very versatile weapon. For those that have watched Georgia the last couple of years, I've always felt like Jeremy Bernard's skill set was very comparable to that of Dylan Bell. If you wanted to hand it to him between the tackles at running back, he could probably handle that. But him now transitioning exclusively to wide receiver is going to be huge, and he might ultimately end up being the number 1 wideout for this Crimson Tide team. The depth at wide receiver is good. I think they have top-end speed, and that's even before the arrival of Ryan Williams, the 5-star freshman who will arrive on campus here in just a couple weeks. Was paying close attention to the tackle position. I thought they held up pretty well. And considering a lot of eyes were on Elijah Pritchett and the fact that Caden Proctor is transferring back to the Crimson Tide, that position might go from a huge question mark to a position you feel pretty good about here overnight. The one area that would be concerning, especially when looking at the rushing numbers for Alabama, would be the defensive line. And they were playing without Jaheim Otis, and he is potentially an all-SEC, maybe even an all-American contender. So his absence was notable. You got to take a good look at some of the depth behind him. And I do think finding more depth along the defensive line is always of significance. So don't be surprised if Bama maybe looks to the portal of a great D tackle, or if a nose jumps in the portal, maybe they roll the dice and try to bring him on campus. The edge rushers were also a position I was paying close attention to. When you lose Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell, you know that that's a pretty significant void. They feel good about their depth on the edges, and I think they have versatility at those positions, like Keanu Cott, who's got great speed, Quay Rousseau, who they feel great about, the veteran leadership of Quindarius Robinson. Those guys should be in a really good spot there on the edges as well, but it's maybe not as deep as they've been in the past when all 3 of those guys served as backups to potential first and second round players in Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell. Linebackers, the strength of their team, arguably, with Deontay Lawson and Jahad Campbell. And then in the back end, Damani Jackson's going to lock down one corner spot, Malachi Moore at safety, Keon Sabb, the transfer from Michigan, at the other safety. I think that safety tandem is going to be excellent as we fast forward into the season. The big question remains, who's going to ultimately be the nickel or the husky position, which is very important in this defense. Will it be a guy that maybe they add in the portal? Will it be a freshman? And who's going to be the second corner? Those will be the areas that I'll be watching closely throughout the summer, and in particular throughout portal season, which opens up here for the next 2 weeks.